They would curb sort, take it back to Happy Hollow, where they would either put this in a big dumpster or they would bale it together. That's the collection part. And then processing, manufacturing, the bottle would go up to Ripple Glass in Kansas City, where they would process it. And then if it were brown glass, it would probably go back to Boulevard Brewing Company, where it would contain another 12 ounces of beer and be sold to maybe somebody in Fayetteville. I really like this example because this is a true closed loop. You drink the beer in Fayetteville, it gets on the truck, goes to the transfer station, goes up to Kansas City, goes to Boulevard, and then it comes back down. And it just keeps circling around. Does anybody know what two kinds of materials, like metal, plastic, paper, that's by that category, what two materials can be recycled forever? There's two kinds.
Paper
glass and
paper.
metal. Glass and metal. The molecular structure, when they melt those things down, it doesn't degrade. In plastic, it does. And in paper, the fibers start to shorten when you repulp it, which is what they do. So that's one of the few things that can go on forever, recycling.
What was even better were the days where you returned the bottles and they washed them. And
Yeah, those programs work very well.
Yeah.
They get very high return rates on those, and there's still states that do that. Okay, so just kind of a brief overview. I think it's important for people to know what's happened to the recycling, and I think a lot of people in Fayetteville feel that way too. So I'm not going to go over all of these because we've got a lot of locations, but we've got a lot of local markets for things. Aluminum cans are going to Wise Alloys in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which I think is kind of funny if y'all know the history of that place. It's a big famous music spot where a lot of people that are really famous started playing music there. And what's the name of it? Novellus? Is it called Novellus? Novellus in Greensboro, Georgia, and they make that into canned stock, and that can be made into new aluminum cans. So there's another completely circular process that's happening with the aluminum. Y'all know where the glass goes, up to Kansas City. Cardboard, some of that goes to Arkansas Craft, which is in Morrilton, very close, and can be used for packaging material. And some of it goes to Muskogee, Oklahoma, which is also very close. So those are close local markets there that those go to. Let's see, I'm going to look at a couple more.
I was going to say, the newspaper that you see there in the corner there, it actually goes to
Joplin, Missouri.
Fiber-Light Technologies, and they will shred that, add a fire retardant to it, and make a blown insulation. And I actually have some of the Fiber-Light Technology insulation in my house, so I like to think some of that paint up there came from the Fayetteville recycling.
So maybe you're learning just by sitting in your living room.
Yeah.
They have to treat that?
Yeah, add fire retardant to it, yeah.
Oh, and has everybody seen by now seen the Recycle Something logo there? So they came out with this, some brilliant design people we have came out with this a few years ago as a campaign signal to get people to recycle more. And you'll know when you see that, that's where that came from. And then the website is right there, which right now redirects you to the city's recycling and trash website if you go to recyclesomething.org. But it's a real simple, it shows you what you can recycle in Fayetteville. So, you know, if anybody ever has a question and you don't have time to explain it to them, you can direct them to that. And it's a real simple website that tells them what they can recycle there. I mean, that's a big part of getting people to do it is they got to know what to do, right? Because if you don't know what to recycle, a lot of people are just going to say, well, I'm not going to do it. You know, it's just not worth my time if I don't know what to do.
Hey, Justin, I got a real quick sidebar, kind of a landfill story.
Yeah.
Newspapers reminded me. Down in south of Fort Smith and Jenny Lind, there was an old dump back in the 1920s or whatever. And they had some contamination issues, and did some core drilling. They were trying to figure out what was down there. And I worked for a company that was in on getting to see the results. They said when they did the core drill, they brought up newspapers from the 20s. You could still read.
That's crazy. I've heard from the 50s that story in William Rathje, the first garbologist, did the same thing in Pennsylvania. They core drilled, and they had a 1951 newspaper article, and this was in the 80s, I believe, and they could still read it. And a hot dog right next to the newspaper that was still a hot dog. Which blows my mind.
That makes you feel good about eating hot dogs.
I've heard that about banana peels, though, because you don't have any air, so it doesn't ever crumble.
Right.
It just preserves it.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy because it's a very good, these people that study garbage, looking through the layers, they'll go down and say, okay, here's, 1950, and they can tell what people were buying because it's all right there thrown away. And you can go to 1990 and say, okay, now they're buying these plastics and things. It's a real good archaeological tool for people that want to have that information. Okay, so, and then we've got number 1 bottles. That's your regular water bottle there. And those are going to Richmond, Indiana, and also Athens, Alabama. And these are made into flake, and they use these in the fiber market a lot. So synthetic fibers, carpet, what else, Brian? Clothing.
Fill, or sleeping bag.
Fill. Yeah. There's a good chance you might be wearing an old bottle if you bought something made out of recycled PET.
That recycle something hat that we have up there, by the way, we have some more if y'all want one. It's made from recycled bottles.
Okay. Do you have any revenue, do you realize revenue out of the bottles?
Yes, everything that we collect and market and sell, all that money goes back into our recycling division.
Sure.
To help offset the cost of the program. It doesn't cover the cost, but it helps to offset the cost.
I was just wondering to what extent it might offset. You don't have a percentage?
The program budget, 1.8 billion. Last year, we collected about 600,000.
It's not bad.
Third, maybe.
Based on market conditions.
Based on market.
Yeah. Number 2 bottles, right there at the top, detergent, those little milk bottles or fruit yogurt things. Those go to Lamar, Missouri, and then Reidsville, North Carolina. So fairly local markets too. They can make drain pipes, paint containers, that sort of thing out of them. Those are, we'll do this a little bit, high density polyethylene, so they're tougher, right? They're tougher, thicker density than the number 1s. The scrap metal, some of it goes to Rogers, really close, and some of it goes to Fort Smith. So 2 really local markets for that. And there's just a variety of metal products they can make out of that. Rebar, they can do some rebar with that, various things like that.
Steel's the number 1 recycled material in the world, so there's no telling what all that is.
Something like 70% of all the steel that's out there gets recycled. So it is highly recycled, the steel is.
But we can't put scrap metal in recycle.
No,
Yeah.
but you can take scrap metal to places in Fayetteville.
Yes,
Bond,
okay. Right.
USA metals, and we even have a box out in front of our transfer station that anybody can come throw scrap metal into without
Okay.
cost.
Right.
It all ends up going back to the
Okay.
markets.
And they have a big magnet out at Springdale, Tommytown at the landfill. I mean, a big magnet over at the construction and demolition landfill over there, and they pull a lot of the metal out. Because
good.
it's pretty valuable. They can get it out of there.
And that's less labor intensive than if you had somebody trying to pull it.
Oh yeah, and the safety issues too. They won't allow anyone more than 6 feet from the truck out there because you got multi-ton equipment. There's all kinds of stuff going on out there. Safety regulations won't allow you to just go over there and pick. Although there are some places, I think probably in like Mexico, that people still pick in open sites like that.
It wasn't that long ago in this country where you could go
Right.
in and pick.
Right.
I remember when you had.
Yeah, sure.
I worked with this guy in California years ago who was in construction back in maybe the late 50s and the 60s in the San Francisco Bay Area. And he told me that, he was kind of character, but he told me that they would just get up to the edge of the bay with trash and just push it in the San Francisco Bay. So we've come a long way.
Well, actually, a great deal of San Francisco was built on landfill, so, you know.
Yeah.
But
Earthquakes.
what actually also is going on in Sonoma County, and has for years and years, is having a recycle town, which I really would think that, like, the Mexican originals would be wonderful for. And it's an incentive for construction not to landfill their waste, for all kinds of. In Sonoma County, they had buildings made out of construction waste, and then they housed furniture and furniture like metal furniture and things that weren't going to degrade real quickly and
Yeah.
whatnot. But it's sort of like a restore kind of thing.
I
But
lived in Sonoma County about a year. They've got very different conditions and things going
That's
on
true.
out there. But yeah, they do a pretty good job from what I remember. Okay, and the steel cans, those go to Burnham, Illinois, and then Gary, Indiana, and those can go into like sheet metal, rebar, metal plates. So that stuff gets recycled quite often.
Are all these people that buy your recyclables, like, you know, all the different places they go, are they all private companies that buy them?
Yes.
Is there any, like, government accepting plastics facility or anything?
No, it's all private driven.
Which highlights one of the sort of the misconceptions about recycling. It's a business. It's market-based business, and prices change and demand changes. And you tell people sometimes that, and they're like, oh, so I can't just magically throw everything I have in the recycle container and expect it to be perfectly recycled everywhere. It is a business. I mean, we live in a market economy, so.
And you've already mentioned it, but one thing I like to remind people is the price of energy and how much that affects everything. So plastics, you can kind of realize, okay, if the plastics are derived from petroleum, that kind of makes sense. But cardboard prices and everything are down, when energy prices are down. You think, oh, it's cheaper to fill up my car, but boy, it affects lots of stuff.
For the consumer, yes, because it's $2.03 a gallon when I just saw it. But that stuff's got to be shipped, and every time you change the gas price, it's going to affect
And like
virgin materials versus recycled
like
materials.
Brian's already mentioned, the plastics market, has just dropped to nothing because it's cheaper to make it from virgin material. They can go out and buy natural gas and petroleum so cheap that it's hard on the recycling industry because nobody wants to buy the bad stuff now, or the dirty stuff, because they.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's.
Which to me is a really good incentive for local clean energy too. And I mean, there's a lot of incentives for that, but I think having, like we've been talking about some green energy in Arkansas, that's a big incentive for it too. So this is another one that I get sometimes, well, are all recyclables the same? Glass versus plastic. So do y'all remember the two materials that can be recycled forever?
glass
Glass
and metal.
Plastic can't. Now I have heard of some instances where they'll take 100% number 2 plastic to 100%. Have you ever heard that, Brian?
There's starting to be more bottle-to-bottle applications for that.
But from what I have read, and it's hard to dig down in the research, you really got to dig for this, because there's a lot of chemistry involved. Plastics, when they start to melt that stuff down, when it's exposed to ultraviolet light as well, the molecular structure starts to change in the plastic. It becomes brittle, and that's the stuff you see on the side of the road. And so in a lot of cases, they have to put virgin plastic in there to maintain the quality of that plastic, to get it like it needs to be for the market it's going to be sold at. And that may change. A couple years from now, it may be totally different.
Well, there's other things that people don't realize either. Like, every once in a while you'll see a news article about, hey, somebody's got a plastic bottle, and hey, if it gets left in the sun, it'll break down. It's because they put some additive in it, thinking, oh, that's great. They make headlines like, oh, this is a great thing. If somebody litters, now it'll break down. Well, now it's less recyclable because all the bottle recycling plants don't want that anymore.
There's no market for it. They don't have the corn.
So they've actually made it worse in a way, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of additives. Well, like Brian mentioned, the temperature additives and things like that changes.
Well, and I take people back to the 3 R's again. If you don't have it in the first place, you don't have to worry about
Right.
it. And that stuff came from oil. It took energy to get out of the earth. It took energy to move it to a processing plant. So there's a lot of energy involved in that whole process.
Because they're using the clamshells,
Yeah.
and they're adding chemicals to them, and they're using that in injection molding, have they figured out a way to take those and use it again in injection molding?
You could recycle those. The problem is you have to have a lot. Sort of like, right now, bottles are so prevalent, it's easy to get a truckload of bottles.
Right, so the market's.
Separating those out, if you collected those separately and had a truckload of that, you can find a buyer. It's just the separation part of all the plastic is hard.
All right, so
Something for Walmart to work on.
Yeah, there's places right around here in Northwest Arkansas that Walmart has set up programs and they reclaim a lot of like the plastic totes, things like that. But when you go into that store, everything is stacked, nice, neat. They get their returns from the stores, and they're all coming nice and neat. It's not just some little mess of stuff that somebody has to sort through.
yeah.
So it's a business.
Sure.
All
Well,
right.
Walmart has done a great deal in reducing packaging by demanding, for reasons like transportation, the business.
One more thing about these, and we'll move on to plastics a little bit. Electronics, very important to recycle. Does anybody know why?
The metals.
The metals.
Yeah.
The heavy metals, right? Most of them are neurotoxins.
Right.
We do not want that stuff in our water supply, for sure. And we get people that, I was at Lake Sequoia a few months ago, pulled up to go fishing one morning, and there's an old CRT TV sitting on the bank that somebody dumped out there.
Well, and also, everybody here probably already knows, but like wastewater treatment systems that clean our water, they don't clean that kind of stuff out.
Yeah, I was wondering about that today. They can
Yeah.
pull the nutrients out. They can pull
Right.
the nitrogen and the phosphorus.
Yeah, and that's what they're there for.
And they can pull the bacteria out. They can
Right.
kill it. But there's a lot of stuff that they can't get
Right,
out.
like pharmaceuticals is another whole
Pharmaceuticals.
nother soapbox,
Right,
they
right.
can't get that, and you can't get the micro beads of, plastic beads
Plastic.
and stuff like that.
Which is
And-
why it's much easier just to keep that stuff out of the water in the first place.
Right.
Here we go. Everybody's favorite. Yeah, and I saw this and I couldn't resist it because this is another one of those, this is why we're trying to do something about this. I mean, this does happen, and it looks like a plastic bag or film to me or something. Plastic bags are hard because they float around, they get in the water, they move, they can block storm drains under the right conditions.
The turtles think it's a jellyfish.
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 It's like a jellyfish.
Yeah, that is like a jellyfish.
And isn't there a market for plastic bags here?
There is here.
Walmart,
We encourage,
Lowe's.
we encourage residents to take the bags. We don't take them in our program, but we encourage them to take it back to the store they got them from. Typically, most stores nowadays will have a bag return
But
program.
isn't there a facility that takes those and?
Yes,
and
AERT
recycles them?
in
Here,
Springdale.
yeah.
Yeah, they can make the composite lumber out of it
Right.
too.
Walmart was really refused mine, but the hearts embedded this.
Huh.
But Walmart usually did so. I don't know if it's the same thing or. I don't know.
Sometimes store-to-store policy can vary, right?
Usually the stores that
Yeah.
are
I
supposed to
thought
put
they
it
were
out.
supposed to take them at all the Walmarts.
It sounds like somebody needs to get with that manager.
Yeah.
You'll get different answers on light bulbs from the two Lowe's in town.
Yeah.
about what they
Yes.
take. And I'm like, well, you guys might want to line your policies up a little bit there. But, so how long have plastics been around?
As well as War II.
World War I.
In mass since about World War II, yeah, but the first ones were made back late in the 1800s, but they weren't really in circulation. About 100 years is what I usually go with. They're pretty new. I mean, your average 15-year-old doesn't know a world without plastic everything, and so there's a whole process of like, you know, this is something that we haven't had for very long. It's very different from the 50s or the 60s or before that. So, you guys know about the codes, right? We talked about the codes a little bit on the bottom. This is a number 5, polypropylene cup. This is a number 6. There's another number 5.
It's another
What's that?
example of where you can find a market. Again, in California, we could recycle styrofoam because there was a styrofoam factory, and they would sometimes they just resell the packaging blocks, peanuts or whatever. But otherwise, they could break it down and remold.
This is a number 1, the most commonly recycled plastic in the world, I think, of the 1 through 7. So what they did back in the early 80s was they made a code system for the type of resin and type of plastic so that they could identify it. But then what happened was you've got these different kinds of plastics like Brian talked about, and it throws people off because it's not just as simple as the number, as y'all already know. It's the shape. This is a bottle because the bottom is bigger than the top. This is not a bottle. Different, right? I mean, the idea was to get a code, but on our end, on the recycling end, it's still not quite as simple as just throwing a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or 4. There's still some separation.
Well, those others should be called 2+.
2 plus. Yeah, well, in my mind, you know, one of the real issues is, if, let's say you're a plastics company and you're making this stuff, you're thinking about where it's going right after that. You're thinking about where you're going to sell it. We're not set up to think all the way down the line. If they were, there might be a system in place where, you know, the minute that thing got made, they would think about where is it going? Where is it going to get recycled? What are we going to do with this? That's kind of our challenge as a society, I think, to do that.
Justin,
yeah.
I have a question. I've always wondered about, I don't know if Fayetteville accepts styrofoam or not. Okay, Rogers does. And does that mean that they have somebody that does buy it? And what's it recycled into? That's what I was wondering.
We were just talking about that right before class. There is a place in Bentonville that will recycle styrofoam, but they only want the block. They don't want the food clamshells, mainly because they're contaminated. Coffee cups, same type of thing. There is different styrofoam, by the way. That place up there in Bentonville will densify it into logs, put it on pallets, and they'll ship it. And I think it's going to a mill in Kentucky right now, that they will make polystyrene picture frames. And I was looking at the wall, that black one up on the wall
Yeah.
to the door, that's really similar to what they make. Even the plastic sheeting that covers the certificate or picture or whatever's in there is styrofoam. Made from styrofoam.
Some toothbrushes are made out of it.
That's what's happening up there.
So I'm going to go through some of this plastic stuff kind of quick because you guys may know some of it, and I want to try to get everybody out around 7 or so. This stuff photodegrades. It doesn't biodegrade. Biodegrading means, you know, you got a banana peel, the bacteria walk up to it, and they're like, that's good. And they start eating it and it breaks down. When the bacteria walk up to this, they just turn around because they don't know what to do with it. That's one of the big differences in your organic stuff, your paper, your cardboard, as far as breaking it down. as best I can tell, nobody knows for sure what happens to it ultimately. Because the tests that they use for biodegradable things, they have a respirometry test where they see how much like CO2 it gives off. But the thing is, it's only been around for less than 100 years, so we know it gets brittle, we know it starts to break down, but we don't know what ultimately happens from those byproducts of it. So it's kind of a big mystery, in a way.
Justin?
Yeah.
When I was working, this is 20 years ago, easy. We were asked to put something in the resin, make it break down, biodegrade, and we were using starch, very low levels of starch that would break down right away and just weaken the plastic. The problem was that if you were going to make something that had to keep it a while, it weakened the plastic to the extent that it didn't have a commercial value. So we stopped doing that. On anything that was going to be made heavy, film is another story. You want to make bag, Walmart bags with a low loading of starch, that would probably be okay.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be any good for you guys because you can't recycle it.
Right.
It can't be used again.
And I've seen some experimental stuff about using fungi and stuff to break down or actually break down some of the plastic. So there's some possibilities there, but I haven't seen anything solid about a common plastic that we can easily break down. One of the issues with these is when this stuff gets into the ocean, it starts to break down and it gets into smaller particles like microplastics. And if you guys remember things like DDT, sprayed with mosquitoes back in the 60s and 70s, and it's still legal in some places, I think, like Mexico maybe. Kind of scary. A lot of those older chemicals that they use and a lot of toxins that can make it out into waterways are hydrophobic. You might know what that means. They're scared of water. What happens is they start to go to the microplastic particles and they concentrate in some of those old pesticide, or that would be an insecticide that were out there, and they start to concentrate in these plastic particles, and then they're trying to figure out how much of that stuff is actually eaten by smaller things on the bottom of the food chain in the ocean, like zooplankton, because it starts going up. And that's another one of these big mysteries that they're trying to figure out what's going to happen with this. And nobody really knows for sure, as best I can tell. But it's definitely something that I think we need to think about when we're thinking about plastic and what we do with it. Because the reality is, even though it should go on a truck to the landfill where it should get recycled, a lot of it ends up in the ocean for various reasons.
Roundup is included in that.
What's that?
Roundup is included in that. And most of the chemicals sold in Mexico come from the United States.
Roundup is much more benign from everything I've heard than something like an old organophosphate, like a DDT or
Yeah, well, true.
the hard stuff
Yeah,
they used to use in the 60s and 70s. But there's not a lot of research on some of that stuff, so they just don't know a lot of times. So here's the codes. I don't want to bore you guys too much because these are kind of hard to pronounce. But number one is a PET, which is polyethylene terephthalate, if you're curious. And the code is, of course, that little thing in the recycling loop on the bottom with the number. That's your number 2, high density polyethylene, because it's tough, it's high density. Your 3 is PVC, like PVC pipe, polyvinyl chloride. This is, as far as toxins